This is Vladimir Nikolaevich Konstantinov. He finds himself winning the Stanley Cup final on June 7, 1997, with the Detroit Red Wings. It's the biggest moment in the young Russian's career, and he was instrumental in defeating the Philadelphia Flyers.
From the other side of the ice, with Corey now.
Big hit. He hit him. Glad is shaking a little bit. He's a little woozy. Konstantinov now is throwing the...
Just 6 days later, after celebrating their victory, Konstantinov, the team's masseur, and Vyacheslav Petizov hired a limousine to drive them home. At that time, the limo driver Richard Nida had a suspended license for drunk driving. Vladimir Konstantinov would never play hockey again after that night. Vladimir Konstantinov grew up in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and while the world raged around him, his mind was solely on hockey. He was damn good at it as well, became one of the youngest ever to captain the Soviet national team. The Russian seemed to have a long and impressive career in front of him. His dominating, ferocious, and unwavering play style would make him a fan favorite and earn him quite unfriendly nicknames like the Red Shark, the Vladinator, and Vlad the Impaler.
Gretzky checked him from behind, and Gretzky winds it around center. They score! Makarov!
Red Wings set their eyes on Konstantinov during Olympic and World Championship matches, where the Russians showed off their talent and skill. Konstantinov himself was a powerhouse, and just what the Red Wings needed. This was 1987. For the last decades, the Red Wings were known as the Dead Wings. They were just not good enough to compete on equal footing with other teams in the NHL. A turnaround was needed, and with a new talented young captain in Steve Yzerman, the Red Wings were looking to win. To do that, they needed winning players like Vladimir Konstantinov. The Red Wings tried signing him, but Konstantinov had signed a 25-year contract with the Soviet Army. If he deserted, he would become a felon. You see, the USSR did things a bit differently than all other countries. Russian hockey players were all enlisted in the army, but instead of participating in military activities, they played hockey and trained around the clock. Konstantinov's contract with the army was a major hurdle. After the Red Wings had worked for over 2 years, they eventually ended up bribing 6 Russian doctors to diagnose and confirm that Konstantinov had an inoperable cancer. They secured a medical discharge from the army and arranged for him to fly to the U.S. Playing in the U.S. and for Detroit went extremely well. Vladimir and his family were adjusting well, and he was absolutely killing it on the ice. Fans loved his ferocity and frequent body checks. WDIV anchor David Sicilian stated, "We can sometimes forget that Vlad was on his way to being probably a Hall of Fame kind of defensive player in the NHL." Konstantinov was a perfect fit for Detroit. Tough, but humble. Incredibly skilled on the ice, but a family man off of it. He was a player that, despite being from the USSR, fans got behind. He also became part of Detroit's The Russian Five, which was a set of 5 former Soviet players, which really rattled the NHL at that time. After decades of losses for the Red Wings, things were finally going their way. Then the 1997 playoffs. Detroit was facing off against the Philadelphia Flyers, but the Flyers didn't stand a chance against Konstantinov and his team. They won with a 4-game sweep and secured the first Stanley Cup in 42 years for the Red Wings. Detroit and the Red Wings went off the rails. People poured out into the streets celebrating the long-awaited victory. The parades and festivities would be short-lived. After a golf outing, just 6 days later, Konstantinov and 2 other members of the Red Wing organization were in a freak accident. The limo that was driving them home hit a tree so hard that it uprooted parts of the trunk. With a license suspended for drunk driving, the limo driver should not even be near a car, let alone be assigned to pick up Konstantinov. Vyacheslav Petizov, the other player in the accident, escaped with minor injuries, and the team's massage therapist was paralyzed from the waist down. Vladimir Konstantinov did not open his eyes for a while after the accident and had received severe brain trauma. The entire city of Detroit was in shock, and the festivities took a somber turn. Fans from the celebration parade changed course and showed support at the hospital. Konstantinov was in a coma for weeks at a time that should be one of the greatest moments in his career and life. They just won the Stanley Cup. He barely survived, but with severe traumatic brain injury. It was obvious to everyone that he would never play hockey again. The Red Wings' dream team was heartbroken. The year after, the playoffs were fought by an intensely motivated team of Red Wings. They had Konstantinov's jersey in their locker and took home another Stanley Cup. In one of the greatest moments in sporting history, Konstantinov was rolled out onto the ice in his wheelchair after the victory. The cup was hoisted onto his lap. He would celebrate with his team one last time. The next year was about winning it for Vladdy. Really a stunning story about sports and about humanity and about bad guys who love each other. Today, Vladimir Nikolaevich Konstantinov's life is completely different from what he imagined as a young boy who loved hockey. Still, he lives a far better life now than what is to be expected from his injuries. For a time, his family had to be prepared for him to pass away, but he recovered despite the odds and has retained his cognition as well. His return to the ice during a charity hockey match on April 27 marks a beautiful moment where the once so dominant Russian gets to play in front of a crowd just one more time.